Do you know the warm progress under the stars? Do you know we exist? Have you forgotten the keys to the kingdom? Have you been born yet, and are you alive? Let's reinvent the gods, all the myths of the ages. Celebrate symbols from deep elder forests. Have you forgotten the lessons of the ancient war? We have assembled inside this ancient and insane theater to propagate our lust for life and flee the swarming wisdom of the streets.
Hi folks, we're back. Welcome to another episode of Radical Communion. My name is Peter Tocci. I'm sitting here with Mr. Giacomo. Giacomo. Nice to see you, buddy.
Nice to see you, Peter.
All the bad boys are here today. That's we're what? The America haters, the drug dealers, the known communists, the level 10 sex offenders. We're all here today.
All we're trying to do is present a little information from a different perspective.
Yep.
We don't have much time today, but can I just, one quick analogy here?
Yes, sir.
When I did some acting, and I did a little in my day, if I was in search of finding who my character was, sometimes I took it to the complete opposite of what it was, the way it was written.
Yes.
And in doing that, sometimes I was able to see who the guy was. And that's pretty much what we're trying to do. If you look at things from a different perspective, sometimes it opens up your whole sense of awareness.
Yeah, that's the idea is to look at things from various points of view without getting all upset about it. Today, we're going to begin today to start my series on 9/11. I have got a video that was put together by a man named Jimmy Walter, and it's a video of an event that was staged in New York on the 3rd anniversary of the September 11th attack. And there's a number of panelists and researchers there, and we're going to be presenting clips from that video, and Jack and I will talk about these things and see what we can come up with. Before we get into that today, I'd like to just cover a few notes that will lead into that. A couple of things came from the newspaper, and this again is from my website feature called Editorial Dailies, where I comment on articles and editorials in the newspaper, the Sentinel and Enterprise, to give the little bit different spin to it. This one was Sunday, September 18th, a syndicated editorial by a guy named Dan K. Thomason. And I bring this up because this is a good example of how the official propaganda is passed through stories like they do it in passing. So even though they may be sometimes even criticizing the government, they will reinforce the official story that they want to propagate about something, whether it be 9/11. In this case, it's 9/11. And this one is about sometimes the buck doesn't stop at all. And this was about the president taking responsibility for the Katrina fiasco. But the reason I bring it out is this is a great example of how the elite propagandize. And so right after he says W's new confessional attitude is refreshing, he says, "The Keene Commission has done as much as anyone else to point up our shortcomings and needs in security and first response." Well, even if that were true, which it isn't, it's not the most important thing that the 9/11 Commission did. And that effort was to have made a mockery of the investigation into the attacks. Everything from errors to omissions of a critical nature to conflicts of interest, such as members of the Commission being associated with legal teams representing the airlines. So that's the kind of stuff, that's an example saying automatically that the Keene Commission did a wonderful job. We're going to see in our clips that that may not be entirely true. Another one here, September 12th, Monday, a syndicated editorial by a guy named John Hall. The title, "A Whole New Cycle of Investigations," referring to in looking into what went wrong in the aftermath of Katrina and all the fiasco that went on there, taking a week even to really get rescue in motion. But the part of this one I want to point out is Hall says, quote, "The fourth anniversary of the September 11, 2001 sneak attack by al-Qaeda terrorists." You see? So he's repeating here that it was a sneak attack by al-Qaeda terrorists, and this hasn't been proven. The government, Condoleezza Rice said right after that, the attacks, that we have all the evidence we need to prove that they did this. All right. Anyway, they didn't. They haven't proven the case yet. So when we're going to get into our clips here, the controversy around 9/11 really is in two categories. The opposition is either a camp that says that the government let it happen, and then the other radical camp is that they made it happen. So as we go through these clips and videos, we're going to see how these two camps play into it. The main evidence we're going to see in this series about the MIHOP is the demolition of the towers, especially Building 7. Some people argue that this is inconclusive because conceivably the terrorists could have set that up, but that's pretty specious to me. And we'll also see in the clips examples of disinfo and gatekeeping that I left in to show you how, because 9/11 is so important, the elite have no doubt infiltrated the movement and are trying to perpetrate lies through so-called investigators. So Carl, if you want to go ahead and play the intro in the first clip, we'll take a look at that.
Now, there is audio with these, right?
Yes.
My name is Jimmy Walter. Like everyone else, I watched the planes hit the World Trade Towers and I watched them collapse. Like everyone else, I thought it was the impact of the planes and the ensuing fires that caused the collapse. Like everyone else, I became concerned with terrorism. I went onto the internet and started researching the foreign newspapers and articles that were appearing there, but were not making the light of day in the American mainstream press, or were buried on page 88 in a small and usually misleading headline. What I discovered was that not only did Saddam Hussein not have weapons of mass destruction, did not have poison factories, but in fact fought al-Qaeda tooth and nail as an arch enemy. I was so alarmed I ran full-page ads in the New York Times, USA Today, various alternative newspapers across the country. I was censored by the LA Times. I was ignored by everyone. I shut up when the war started in order to support our troops. After mission accomplished was asserted, I started going around the country to the protests to bring our boys home. There I met Eric Hufschmidt, who had written Painful Deceptions and Painful Questions. I got his book and video, but never gave him the time of day. At worst, I thought 9/11 was a sin of omission, where the administration had let it happen in order to further their own nefarious world domination purposes. I did not believe that the World Trade Center was brought down with explosives. About 6 months later, a friend cajoled me into watching Eric's video. It was an epiphany. I knew after watching his video that towers had been brought down with explosives. Watch the following video of the event I produced on September 11th of 2004 in New York City, which follows. And see, as they say in the Matrix, how deep this rabbit hole goes. I really do feel like I took the red pill. Brace yourself. You're in for a rude awakening.
I'm Ed Begley Jr. How are you all this evening? Thank you for coming. I'm going to be your host for this evening's program. Welcome to Confronting the Evidence, a call to reopen the 9/11 investigation. I'll be your host for this evening's program. I'd like to ask you please to finish taking your seats as we're going to begin in a moment. I don't need to tell you that tonight marks the 3rd anniversary of the September 11th event.
Okay, just a quick comment on that first clip. Jimmy Walter made mention of that Al-Qaeda and Osama were enemies. But the implication that Al-Qaeda carried out 9/11 is what's in question. So that's an example of how you can be misled by something in passing. So that's good. Now we can go right ahead to the second clip. And this is David Ray Griffin, a man who's written these 2 books here, the 9/11 Commission Report and A New Pearl Harbor. And we're going to hear what he has to say. So go ahead, Carl, run that second clip.
I'm glad to be part of this very important event, which is made possible by Nico's invitation and Jimmy's video. I would like to use my time to talk about the 9/11 Commission Report, which is the present subject of my research. Many people have asked me, how good is the report? Well, that depends on your perspective. If you're one of the average Americans who get their news about 9/11 from the mainstream media, you will probably think the 9/11 Commission Report is excellent. This seems to be the opinion of people who write customer reviews on Amazon.com, almost all of them giving it 5 stars. Some of them praise it by saying, it reads like a novel. Well, that's true. I myself would give it 5 stars if it were correctly categorized, that is, as a work of fiction. We are told in the preface that it was an attempt to give the fullest possible account of the events surrounding 9/11. Now, of course, they can't quite mean that. There were trillions of events surrounding 9/11. They meant they were going to give an account of those that seemed relevant to understanding 9/11. So that means there had to be a principle of selection. That principle of selection would be based upon your perspective. That is, your basic theory about what happened on 9/11. There are, of course, 2 basic theories of 9/11. Both of them are conspiracy theories. One of them is the official conspiracy theory put out by the Bush administration, according to which the attacks were planned and carried out entirely by Al-Qaeda, inspired by Osama bin Laden. The other account, which is the alternative conspiracy theory, suggests that the attacks were made possible by the complicity of the Bush administration itself. In the preface, we read that the report is intended to be impartial, but it is definitely not impartial as between these 2 theories. The Commission began its work simply by assuming the truth of the official theory. It did not argue for that theory, it simply assumed its truth from the outset and throughout its work. And it uses this theory to decide which events are relevant. We're also told in the preface that they intended their work to be independent and nonpartisan. Now, by nonpartisan, they meant that the committee was made up equally of Democrats and Republicans. Even this claim isn't quite true, because the chairman of the commission is Republican, and even more importantly, the executive director is a Republican. And this executive director, Philip Zelikow, is not just any old Republican. He was a member of the National Security Council of the Bush I administration, where he worked with Condoleezza Rice. Then, during the Clinton years, when the Republicans were out of office, he and Condoleezza Rice co-authored a book. And I have co-authored a book with somebody, and I know you have to be very good friends and you have to share almost all beliefs in common. He then worked for the transition team for the National Security Council for the transition between the Clinton and Bush administrations. And finally then, he was appointed to Bush's Foreign Intelligence Advisory Board. So the commission is definitely not independent, if you mean independent from the White House, because the executive director represents the perspective of the White House. Now, why is this important? The executive director directed the work of the staff, and the staff of the commission, not the commissioners, did almost all the work. And as director of the staff, he decided which lines of inquiry were worthy to be looked into, which subjects should be subject to research, and which ones should not. Therefore, as executive director, Zelikow could direct the staff to investigate those events that were relevant to the official conspiracy theory and simply ignore all events that would be supportive of the alternative conspiracy theory. Some critics, having read the 9/11 Commission report from the perspective of the alternative theory, have called it the 9/11 Omission Report. Well, this is a good name because it systematically excludes virtually every fact supporting the alternative theory. But given Zelikow's role, this should be no surprise to us. Some people have also called it a whitewash, and it is. But this term assumes that the commission should have investigated the White House, that is, various kinds of evidence suggesting that there was complicity by the White House. But given Zelikow's position, any investigation of the White House would have been carried out by, essentially, the White House itself. A more accurate way to put it was that as the White House's inside man on the commission, Zelikow was in position to make sure that the White House, along with the CIA, the FBI, the Pentagon, and the Justice Department, was not investigated. Once we understand this, we will not be surprised by the Commission's omissions.
Okay. Anything strike you on that one, Jack?
Just a couple things in regards to the word, what is it, complicity?
Complicity.
Complicity, meaning they're being complacent.
No, meaning that they took part in the, in other words, they allowed. Complicity means that they knew, or they had some idea, or they knew the whole thing, but they knew that Al-Qaeda was going to do this, and they complied. Yeah. Now, that's what it means.
The only thing that comes to my mind is, like, again, you hear Republican, you hear Democrat, and,
right.
And in my frame of thinking is, it's a half dozen of one.
You got it.
Or, six of the
right.
other.
Yeah.
I look at a Republican and a Democrat like the same coin, but just opposite sides. So my question would be, what would have happened if, at the point Al Gore became president instead of George Bush?
Yeah.
The event probably still would have happened.
That's correct.
So I don't think it really matters as to who is in the White House.
That's right.
If it's one of the major parties. This is just my opinion.
That's an excellent point.
So, who does the blame lie with? Does it lie with the Republican? Does it lie with the Democrat?
We're talking about the elite.
Yeah.
And that's a good point. In fact, all the commissions, Warren Commission, the Tower Commission, These are how the elite, they mount the commission to do the investigation, to do the cover-up. That's how it works. So now I guess we can run a third clip, and that should take us about to the end of the show. So go ahead, boys, and run that third one. This is
Possible that the authorities would actually allow 9/11 to happen for political gain at such an enormous cost to human life. Consider what the authorities knowingly allowed to happen to the residents of this city immediately after September 11th. Let me please introduce Jenna Orkin of the World Trade Center Environmental Organization. Jenna.
September 11th was a tragedy that has changed the course of history and the way we live. It was also an environmental disaster of historic proportions. The World Trade Center contained about 50,000 computers, each made with between 4 and 12 pounds of lead. That's not including World Trade Center 7. Hundreds of tons of asbestos coated the first 40 stories of at least one tower. The tens of thousands of fluorescent light bulbs each contained enough mercury to contaminate a quarter of a city block. The smoke detectors contained radioactive americium-241. The alkalinity of the air was equivalent to that of Drano. A month after the disaster, scientists from the University of California at Davis found levels of vanadium and very and ultrafine particles that were the highest they'd ever seen of 7,000 samples taken from around the world, including at the burning Kuwaiti oil fields. Dr. Marjorie Clark has testified that 9/11 was equivalent to dozens of asbestos factories, incinerators, and crematoria, as well as a volcano. Yet starting on September 13th, the EPA maintained the air is safe to breathe. A report by the EPA Inspector General in August of 2003 revealed that EPA's press releases, which initially warned the public about asbestos in the air, were edited to offer reassurances instead. The editing was performed by the White House Council on Environmental Quality in order to reopen Wall Street. That's in the report. As a result of the false good news, rescue workers were sometimes not allowed to wear respirators on the grounds that they might frighten the public. Insurance companies often refused to pay for cleanup, forcing residents to clean the tons of toxic debris in their apartments, as per the instructions from the New York City Department of Health. Use a wet mop or wet rag, and where the dust is really bad, wear long pants. We are beginning to see the consequences of this disastrous chain of events. Over half of the heroes who cleaned Ground Zero are already manifesting serious respiratory problems. Hundreds of firefighters can no longer work, and as a harbinger of what's in store for people, 14 rescue dogs have died. The Commission report deals with this issue in a footnote on page 555. They interviewed Sam Thernstrom, the White House coordinator who changed the press releases. He said his motive wasn't to reopen Wall Street, it was procedural. His story is corroborated by Christy Todd Whitman, who told the initial lies. When John Gotti is corroborated by Lucky Luciano, that may be good enough for the Commission. We should not rest there. In the environmental disaster of 9/11, Osama bin Laden could not have found a better collaborator, a more kindred spirit than George W. Bush.
We can reassure the public that the air is safe to breathe, the water is safe to drink.
EPA officials were lying to the public and to Congress about the health effects engendered by the 9/11 catastrophe.
Because the EPA said the offices were safe and employers ordered their employees back into these buildings, and thousands of us are now permanently ill.
I headlined at Radio City Music Hall with the Rockettes dancing behind me. I sang everywhere there was to sing a song, but I can't sing now because every time I try to sing now, I choke.
So in the middle of October, October 15, 2001, I came to work. 2 days later, I woke up at night, October 17, 2001, and my lungs were full and gurgling. The respiratory function was so low that it woke me up out of a sound sleep. And from that day on, I've been sick.
In fact, the air was hazardous for many, many months, and all those tons of hazardous material were lodged in people's homes, in their offices, where in many cases they still are.
That's it. He said still are today. Got to stop that clip there, boys, okay?
Turn off to me. She was a turn off.
Yeah.
My initial comments were, where were these people when that initial dust cloud came? They probably got a good mouthful. They're not telling us any of that. And where would, with what happened in New Orleans, with the fact that, if they shut down New York for a period of months, okay, where would, the whole country probably would have went down the tubes. We were that close. If they didn't open Wall Street, this is just me airing it out, our economic system would have collapsed. Totally
that's
collapsed.
a fine point of view, except that if your lungs filled up and you couldn't sing and talk anymore.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, she was just a turnoff.
We got to wrap it up.
We'll run. We'll talk about it next time.
All right.
Okay, that's what we're here for.
Jeffo. Yep.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
O great creator of being, grant us one more hour to perform our art and perfect our lives. Moths and atheists are doubly divine and dying. We live, we die, and death not ends it.